In France, Italy, Belgium, the far-right parties came first. In Greece, Elliniki Lisi, the Greek solution, took fourth place for the very first time. Moreover, there was a huge abstention rate, 47.5%, and 1 in 5 voted for the far-right party. Today, we are not here only to discuss the realities of far-right across Europe, but also to think and develop our modalities of resistance. We couldn't do that without our panel. We actually warmly welcome today. Our panel consists of Nora Fülöp from Hungary. She's a social scientist and activist. Malene Gürgen from Germany, and she's a journalist. Dimosthenis Papadatos-Anagnostopoulos from Greece. He's a member of Simeio, researching and confronting the far right and political scientist. Gianluca Tatarelli from Italy, and he's an activist too. And we have here with us today Ulysse, who is a member of CGT, General Labour Confederation. Our panel includes 2 rounds and 2 questions in total. After the end of those rounds, you have the time to ask questions and add comments and thoughts and whatever we want. On behalf of the Aus der Nacht, heraus festival and Auswärts, we would like to thank you for being us today, and we will start with the panel right now. So for the first round, we would like to discuss how the far right actually has been shaped in every country. That means, what characteristics does it have? How and why do far right seems to be a solution for the people who vote them, actually? So I will give the mic to you if you'd like, or like from this side, however, who feels more ready? Okay, so I'm gonna start from here. Okay, yeah, maybe French because it's, yeah, class warrior, exactly.
That is actually, yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So I am a bit of a last-minute replacement for a French activist who was supposed to come and now is involved in the campaign now. So I will try to summarize in a few words the situation in France, and of course, if you have questions, I can elaborate. So. Of course, the news, heads of the news are full of this party called Rassemblement National, so Le Pen's party. So it is a far-right party that was a more or less marginal party during the 20th century, but which had a continuous rise for the last decades. And it has been in the second round of now 3 presidential elections, but always beaten by the traditional right. And now the news in the European elections is that this party suddenly gained 10% in the election, so it had 31% in the European elections. The second party in the European elections was Macron's one, who had only 14%, so it is a huge gap. And in the evening of the election, Macron decided to dissolve the assembly, and now there is a very serious possibility that the election, this far-right party will win the elections in 2 weeks and will govern the country in 2 weeks. So what is this party? So their platform is based on mainly, I would say, 2 topics, which you know very well if you're interested in the far right: immigration and police. So on immigration, they have many laws, both to restrict immigration, to restrict the access to citizenship, but also to make life worse for foreigners that are there. So for the access to citizenship, I think the biggest reform would be the abolition of birthright citizenship that exists in France, and abolition of how do you call it, like family, the possibility to immigrate if a member of your family is already there. They want to abolish both. And then they want to restrict many, like almost all social benefits. They want to restrict it to French citizens only, to restrict access to social housing, to public employment, and other things like this. So there would be really, if they could implement their whole program, they could implement only a part of the program if they win these elections, but then they would also apply for the presidential elections in 3 years. But if they implement even part and also for the full program, it would really immediately make life much worse for a big part of the population who is not French. There are also things on Islam which I didn't mention on my paper, but which are important. So they are very Islamophobic. And then there is the police part. So they are very pro-police. It's a core of their voters too. And what they propose, if I understood well, is some kind of immunity for the police. So we have a lot of police violence in France. We had it over the last years. De facto, it's very rare that a policeman is condemned by the justice, but they would make it really official. So they are really pro-police violence and pro-immunity for the police. So they would more or less give the police the right to kill. And yes, so I guess these are the two main themes in their program. And there is also a third, more minor but growing theme against ecology. I can also talk about it if you want. They are against the development of clean energy, against the ban of thermic vehicles, for example. So this is what their policies are, and then who votes for them? So many French people. The core of their social basis, as in many countries, I think, are less educated people and people who live outside big cities. So we call this in French France périphérique. And it's the exact reverse of the voting basis of the left. But now the big news in the last 2 years is that they made these very big gains. So from around 20% to around 30% of the voters. And so now they became hegemonic in really many milieux. So among their new voters, according to the polls, are older people who didn't used to vote for them, and more middle-class people too. And then why did they rise so much? So there are many causes, and again, I think I can answer to your question, but one important cause that deserves to be mentioned is Macron's policy. So Macron has been in power since 7 years now, and he had these very tough neoliberal policies that really alienated almost all of the French people. And you all, of course, heard about these big protests. So the two biggest waves of protests were the Yellow Vests and the protest against the pension reform. And the two of them were really big, and like huge parts of the population identified with these movements, and the two were ignored and repressed with violence. And this really created this divide between the population and the government. And this benefited more the far right, who doesn't have very pro-social policies, than the left, unfortunately. But this is one of the conditions. And the other Macron's policies that benefited the far right is his policies on immigration and police, especially immigration. So during his 7 years, he gained power with this idea that he would implement neoliberal policies in the economic realm, but that he was more liberal on several themes, including immigration. But then his reaction to the rise of the far right was to imitate their policies, and he implemented more and more soft versions of Le Pen policies. And now we reached the point last year where he voted a law with the far right MPs in parliament against immigration. that implemented many of Le Pen's proposals, not all, but several of them. And Macron decided that his MPs would vote it because he knew that it would be censored by the Constitutional Council. So this was a kind of a political game, but what is the result of this game? So the policies are not implemented now, I mean, not the most radical of them, but Le Pen can say, okay, now we see that the people want it, even the MPs want it, so now we have to change the constitution, and this is a core part of her program. So, so in the end, both on the economic side and on this immigration side, I think Macron clearly contributed to this very dire situation.
Thank you so much. Like, I found it really interesting when you said who voted actually, and looking at the news from Germany, for example, we have like this race that actually one of the three workers voted for AfD, and actually that the younger generations voted for AfD. And yeah, grounding on that, but also answering to our question, I would give the mic to you, and please.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. I was a bit unsure how to prepare because I guess that many of you do live in Germany and are also involved in maybe German politics in some way, maybe some others aren't. So yeah, I hope that it's not too basic for those who are involved here. So what I can say is that also in Germany, of course, many people were very shocked by the election results this week, where the AfD, our right-wing party, received 16% of the votes for the whole country, which is less than they had in some polls several months ago, but is more than with the last elections, and also made them the second strongest force this time. And in Eastern Germany, the former GDR, they got particularly good results, and in local elections, which took place in many federal states, they even became the strongest party in many Eastern German regions. And if we look not only at these numbers from the election results, but at the general mood in society, there are even more things I think that should worry us. So there were surveys conducted around the election where almost half of the people who were asked said that they worry about too many foreigners, too many migrants, too many refugees in Germany. So we really have to say that we're not only dealing with an increasingly strong and increasingly racist AfD, but also with racist attitudes in the population that go far beyond the AfD voters. So also people who vote for other parties think at the moment that the biggest problems in Germany are crime and migrants or refugees. And similarly, we also see that not only the AfD is agitating against refugees and migrants, but almost all other parties are also trying to outdo each other with proposals on how to restrict migration. So I think similarly as you told it about in France, and I think we see this everywhere, we have this racist parties, but then we have other parties or the government reacting to that in trying to making racist politics. And so therefore we see that the AfD is already very successful in influencing politics to a high degree, although they are still, I would say, relatively far from actually govern in Germany. I mean, there's no party that would form a coalition with them right now, at least on the federal level. On the local level, we can already see that there are forms of cooperation between the Conservative Party, CDU, for example, and AfD. But on the federal level, we don't see this at the moment, but still they can influence politics in this way. And the AfD has been on the political landscape for around 10 years now, and the party has changed a lot in this time, as probably you all know. So at the beginning, they were also a right-wing and racist party, but they tried to at least officially keep a certain distance from very openly right-wing extremist organizations. And this is no longer the case now. So now they have these connections very openly, and they themselves are considered an extremist right-wing organization. And yeah, I think sometimes it's funny if you look at certain people from the party, and maybe there was a big scandal about them in, I don't know, 2016 or something. Maybe there was an employee for an MP, and then people said, okay, it's not okay that this neo-Nazi is working for this guy. And now the same neo-Nazi is, I don't know, candidate for federal elections or something. So you really see this development. And this, that they have become more and more openly right-wing extremists, doesn't really seem to affect their electoral result or success in Germany. So people still vote for them, and they also always say when they're asked, like, I know that they are racist or they're right-wing extremists, I still vote for them. So it's not like they don't know. But it brings some problems for AfD on the European level, because it is a difference to Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National or Giorgia Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia. And also the AfD, I mean, there always have been conflicts about this, but I would say at the moment they're mostly pro-Russia, and this is also a big difference to Rassemblement National, for example, which are more transatlantic oriented. So we can really see at the moment, maybe we also discuss about this more later, that there are very big conflicts within the European far right at the moment. And I think it's very interesting to see now how the AfD will position itself in these conflicts. And I would say that at the moment it's unclear, it's not resolved, and I think they themselves have fights about this and don't know in which direction they should go. So yeah, and just briefly, I would say that other right-wing extremist parties that you said at the beginning, these like more classic neo-Nazi organizations, they have become less important in the last year, because also the AfD has, like, as a sponge, like, took all the voters, absorbed them, and also the stuff of other parties. But now we see a bit of reorganization in this spectrum. Also, we have some, like, there's a party in Saxony now, which also, like, reorganizes. And in Eastern Germany in particular, we see these attempts to form a cultural, political, social hegemony as it was there in the 1990s often, like the whole regions completely dominated by the far right. And in some regions this also didn't disappear, but in some it didn't, and now they're trying to re-establish that. And that this is possible is also due to the fact that the Conservative Party, the CDU, I would say, is making life difficult for civil society organizations who fight against this. But I think we will maybe speak more about this in the second round. But now I didn't answer your question so much, but just shortly to that, I would say that, yeah, I mean, it is true that also in Germany we see a lot of I don't know, low income, low education people voting for them. Not only, one has to say, and I always say that I'm, like, if you look at socio-demographic, socio-economic factors, it really doesn't matter which one, there's still like a very clear divide between West and East Germany, former GDR. And I mean, this is, I don't know, outrageous, or it's very, it's something after so many years. And I'm always like more angry at people who are very well, who maybe lived in West Germany, who don't have financial problems, who are very well politically represented, who are very well represented in their interests, and still vote for AfD, and they exist as well. And then considering the youth, maybe just one sentence, I also maybe wouldn't overestimate these results now. Of course, it's shocking. But at the last European elections, we had this in 2019. There was this time where the climate movement was big, and a lot of young people voted for Green parties. This is not so long ago, so I mean, I wouldn't say like the youth is lost now or something. Of course, it is like it's not to blame on TikTok only, but it is true that the AfD is the only party who's putting a lot of resources into these kinds of social media, and just money and stuff into that. And I think they're also the only party which, like, I think it's mostly young men actually, not young women so much. And I think with some topics around masculinity, the AfD is providing not answers, but like they're talking about it in a way that no other party doesn't. This is obviously attractive to some of these people.
Thank you so much. It's very also important, like, to bring the gender topic into discussion when we, discuss the far right and the new right. And I would like to give the floor now to Nora from Hungary. So I think it's really important, like, to discuss this topics as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here, and I think I'm always find great when we have a chance to change or discuss our experiences among a lot of countries, because the far right have like international projects, and I think like one of my favorite topics nowadays to see like how well the right wing is organized globally, so to say. And yeah, I could also resonate with a lot of points that you have said, and obviously I have a little bit difficult task here, because we have, like, I think the question was like what form the far right has in specific countries, and my first impulse were in Hungary they have the form of government, and we have, like, the Fidesz came to power in 2010. Like, if you have question about like why it happened and how it happened, I can also elaborate on that. But just a few characteristics about the way how Fidesz is functioning in the government. I would say that what changed before Fidesz and after Fidesz, like before 2010 and after 2010, obviously in Eastern Europe we have the history of the system change, as in also in Eastern Germany, and after this, the integration of Hungary after the system change in the global economy was mainly directed through a transnational capital fraction from the West, and the local managers who were working for big companies, who came to power as party members, etc., etc. And obviously this kind of liberal integration project, which was, I think, in the 1989, 1990s, or already before, it was combined with a big hope of the people that the situation will be like we will live like the Austrians live. This was the big promise, and obviously it did not came true, because all of these parties after the system change, they had really hardcore neoliberal courses in Hungary, and at the same time, as within this liberal discourse, it was not really possible to talk how the labor is how it is going with the labor, what kind of sufferings the workers had this in this era, and this is what was, I think, the keeping point, how to say it in English, like the turning point for the Fidesz government, that it could mobilize and organize these effects from the side of the workers under the concept of the nation, and at the same time. He managed to organize the local capitalist class, the local capital fraction, and the economic policy changed a lot since 2010. If you consider that the national capitalists had now a bigger part in the power, and at the same time, considering the relationship between capital and labor, it's even more neoliberal than before. So this is as introduction. I think I did not want it. Yeah, and since 2010, Fidesz really demolished the social state, and the social services of the state. And for example, we have like social policies, but it's giving benefits for the families, especially for the families, and especially for rich families. And if you are not rich, if you are a member of a Roma minority that we have in Hungary and in Eastern Europe generally, it's really hard to live. Yeah, and like we have also really a change in the work regime, I would say, and there is no labor politics, there is no investitions in the human capital, like in quotes, and at the same time, like the first move of the Fidesz was to change the constitution. Like they were winning, I think, like not much more than 50% of the votes. But with this 50% of the votes, they have 2/3 in the parliament, and they have the majority to change the constitution. This gives them like over proportional power. And at the same time, they were also demolishing the media. So there is also really like there is a few online sites nowadays that are still existing, and they can be critical with the government, but not really. They don't really reach the people. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think I also have this kind of like what you were also saying, that I think big danger of a far right party that it pulls all the discussion, even if they are not getting into power, they will pull the political discussion to the right. And I can also, like in Hungary, I was thinking like, what is far right? Because it's like, you know, it has this implicit meaning that there is still some kind of center somewhere, and I don't like in Hungary. No, like there is no like there is only far right, and I would say that there are different actors which maybe have a gradual difference to Fidesz. But like there is a small party that is getting also more popular on the countryside. Their name is Our Homeland, and they are overtly anti-Semitic and racist and anti-communist. And there are violent neo-Nazi groups who have also this kind of overlap with the football scene. I guess it's also very like it's a phenomenon that you can find also in other countries. And I would say, like, not just to talk about the history, what happened in Hungary, I would mention like one, I think, new turning point, I would say, because it also shows how much the political climate changed. There was this, in 2023, there was this Day of Honor, like it's a neo-Nazi festival in Hungary, where all the neo-Nazis meet from all around the world and remembering on the heroes of the Second World War. And there were Antifa people coming to Hungary from Italy, from Germany, and they beat up a few Nazis after this, after the Day of Honor. And after this, what happened there is that there is meanwhile a quite popular and quite successful new movement. It's named Sikra, and the police accused a member of this movement that she was also taking a part in these attacks, because she had a Facebook post with a quote which was a little bit similar to one of the attackers. And she was, in 2 weeks long, she was in prison. All the news portals close to Fidesz, they leaked all the personal information of this person, and they tried to make the connection between the Western Antifa movement as a terror organization and this Hungarian leftist movement. And they were quite successful in that. And I would say that the effects of, like, it was all in the news in Hungary, that Antifa and all this leftist movement, like I would say this also a little bit change of the. I'm too long. I know. I'm so sorry. So before, I think the main narrative delegitimating the left was maybe anti-communism, which has a big tradition since the system change. And now they are making these connections with Western Antifa movement that try to influence the political situation in Hungary. And last week there were an event of the International Marxist Tendency for the Hungarian group, and there were some neo-Nazis coming to this event, and they beat up the kids who were just watching the stream this week. Yeah, and I make a point and I can answer all the questions.
Yeah, Hungary is, yeah, I don't know. I have no comments, like it's, because like in Greece, for example, we have this discussion, okay, we don't know how far right can just like, if in Greece, for example, in governments, okay, how they're gonna govern, but Hungary is just an example of like actually governing. So I think I will give the floor to you, Dimosthenis. Now that I mentioned Greece, because also we had some not that similar accidents with like beaten up after a transphobic incident in Thessaloniki, and then like a movement that sprang up, and some people tried to support it, and there was also like fights. You're not supposed to talk about it, but you can just talk about the Greek context right now.
It's nice for me to be here, despite the fact we will not talk about nice things. For me, it's the second time I'm in Berlin. The first one was in 2009. For me, it seems like another world. So if you had invited me something like 10 years before, 15 years before, my main focus would be on two parties, that is to say the Popular Orthodox Rally, Laos, which was a party that took part in the Greek government since 2011, and the second party would be the Golden Dawn, the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn, that was very violent and very active after the revolt of the Greek youth after the murder of Alexis Grigoropoulos. It was the time for the neo-Nazism in Greece to rise, the moment after Alexis' murder. It's a totally different landscape they won today. In order to make some bridges and make it more clear, I would suggest something like a periodization. The first period would be the one from 2009 to 2013. 13 is the year of the murder of Pavlos Fyssas, an anti-fascist activist, which is the moment of rise and the moment for glory for both for the fascist, the neo-fascist, and the post-fascist current of the Greek far right. The murder of Pavlos Fyssas, I have to say that until the murder of Fyssas, officially for the Greek government, there was no such an issue as a far right issue. Officially, the Greek government did not admit that Greece had a far right problem. What they were telling is, like what Karl Lovenstein would say, militant democracy. The problem for the government was the problem of two extremes, two edges. The one was the very moderate and reformist and the neoliberal party Syriza, and the left and the movement, and the other extreme was the murderers of the Golden Dawn, two extremes. After the assassination of Fyssas, this rhetoric scheme collapsed, obviously it collapsed, and it was a second period, let's say a period from 2013 to 2019, a period of reorganization of the far right. Reorganization both in organizational terms, which organization would follow, would cover the gap of the Golden Dawn because they were jailed, and a reorganization in terms of agenda. After the neo-Nazis, a new far right, a new organization, what they will tell, which is their focus. And there, let's say, some responses concerning the agenda. The one was the Macedonian issue, the fight against the Prespa agreement, concerning the relations of Greece and Northern Macedonia, and the other response concerning the agenda was the anti-woke agenda, what they say anti-rightism, anti-δικαιωματισμός for Greeks. Δικαιωματισμός in Greek, it's a pejorative way to say human rights things, both. And the equivalent in international terms is anti-woke. I think that we live in the third period. I would put it from 2020 to now. The government has changed. We have a conservative government since 2019. And the idea, after the Golden Dawn was condemned and was recognized juridically as a criminal organization, the idea is that a part of its work, let's say, would be assumed from the state, would be assumed to the state. The state would do what the Golden Dawn had done before its trial. And the main party of the far right would be a post-fascist current that is ready, the Euro elections prove that it's ready, to make the job, to alter the agenda, to totally alter the agenda from what is the agenda for the Greek, the majority of the Greek society. We went to the elections and the surveys before the Euro elections, all of them that were qualitative and were writing down what are the main topics that concern the Greek society. The main topics is a health system that is collapsing, especially after COVID-19. The main topic is the inflations and the prices, which are enormous. The main topic is a taxation to the new middle social strata, which is unfair. I mean, a bill that passed just before the Euro elections. The femicides is one of them, and it is very interesting that in a country with that many femicides, the Greek far right is always talking about anti-woke culture, woke culture and anti-wokeism. And to sum it up, the agenda in Greece is the agenda of the classical social issue. What is the main agenda of the far right? Anything but the traditional social issue. So it is evident from the elections that the Greek far right is voted mainly by the Greek periphery and the northern periphery. There are three parties that have representation in the Euro elections. The one is the main one is the Greek solution, Ελληνική λύση, Kyriakos Velopoulos. He pretends to be a businessman, and it is very interesting that more and more the Greek far right likes declaring that there are businessmen in their lines. They do not have, they do not feel obliged to say that we are popular, we are with the Greek people. This is the issue with Latinopoulou, Φωνή Λογικής, rational voice of rationality, we would say. If someone counted their electoral list, they would find that no less than 7 persons were representing themselves as businessmen. It is interesting. Businessmen claiming vote of a Greek society which is very fragmented, very impoverished, and very anxious concerning its economic perspective. The agenda of them, it's an anti-woke agenda mainly, and the main battle that the Greek far right were organizing against a very neoliberal government are battles concerning mainly the human rights issue and the anti-woke culture. So I will stay here and not go further concerning the resistance. I just want to, in order to finish my first round, I started my talk saying that if we were in 2010, I would say that some other parties, etc. I said the half, because if we were here in 2011, I would start from the Golden Dawn and the Popular Orthodox Rally and all this, but I would add that there is also a very big movement and resistances and the neoliberal movement and the Greek radical left party, which is very near in order to take the government. I think that we cannot have the general pictures and we cannot have the ties and, let's say, a convincing scheme if we exclude from our account the dynamics between radical left and the far right. And it is the picture in all over the southern Europe, because the far right does not rise in the same manner and in the same velocity, in the same speed all over the Europe. There are stages, there are different speeds. Concerning the speed in the southern Europe, it seems that the southern Europe was something like exception because Cyprus, Spain, Portugal and Greece did not have the far right as France had or Italy had. Italy is the exception of the exception, let's say. But after 2015-16, in all over the southern Europe except France, it seems that the dynamics between the radical left and the far right changed radically. And it seems that after we are defeated, because it was a defeat, and after we capitulated, because it was both a capitulation, the social issue agenda, it remains close. It remains something that we cannot avoid talking about this, but it seems that it's beyond our possibility to change it, beyond our possibility to make a change on this, to make something to ameliorate things. So, as the social issue agenda is closed, the one that feels impoverished, very angry, very desperate concerning their economic perspective, cannot choose the left because it is something like finished. And either they don't go to vote, we have 6 in 10 in abstinence in Greece, the Euro elections, or they choose the far right in order to show their, let's say, about their disposal against the system. I stay here and we'll make a different second.
Far right, a new so-called new right, is not this extremist right that we used to. So now the floor is yours and Italy.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the other speakers. Sure, the current far right is not the one of 10 years ago, but in another sense, I would say the opposite. It is the same of 10 years ago. Why? Basically, I think we have to start by distinguishing different kind of right. In Italy, at least in Italy, we have two different kinds of right. We have the far right and then the traditional right, which is the center right. Now, just to give you a brief overview, if you don't know the Italian situation, the far right is divided into 3 main groups. There are the neo-fascists, which are basically small groups, which are very much attached to the fascist tradition, because of course our situation is very peculiar also because we have this historical link with fascism. It was a reality that existed not just 70 years ago, but also in post-war Italy through the MSI, about which I will talk briefly in a moment. Then we have the post-fascist, which are basically represented today by Giorgia Meloni's FDI, Fratelli d'Italia, and then the crypto-fascists, which are a new creature by Matteo Salvini. Because what did Matteo Salvini do some 5-6 years ago? Basically, he changed a party which was a territorial party, very much radicated, rooted in the northern Italy, and it transformed it into a crypto-fascist party. What do I mean? Basically, a party which has the same exact agenda as the post-fascist party by Giorgia Meloni, but with different names and with different historical traditions, let's call it that way. And then there are, of course, the center-right parties. But now, what is the peculiarity of the Italian right? I would say, briefly, we have these 2 characteristics. First, the far right, is the far right normal today? I would say yes, of course it is normal, but it is not something new. What we are living today, at least in Italy, is the result of a long process which has been undergoing for 20, 30 years. Why do I say that? And another main feature of the current far right in Italy is and I think this is very important, and that's the reason why I agree and disagree with the idea that now the far right is changing, because what happened recently is that all these different kind of factions, so the far right and the center right, are creating one single common ground in which they seek the hegemony. So they are talking about the same issues in the same manner, just to steal the hegemony of the others. And I think this is a very serious situation, because that's new, because this is the end point of a tendency, but that's the end point. We have to consider that, because this is very serious, and it is more serious than it used to be. Now, do you hear me? Yeah, I think you can hear me. Now, basically, just to give you an example, because I said that, yeah, this normalization is not something new, it is the end point of a process. Just to give you a lively example of that, I will just mention 4 little sad stories. Now, first, in 2019, Berlusconi, I think needs no presentation because he's known. Yeah, sadly, now he passed away, but he was really well known. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you cannot imagine how celebrated he is now in Italy, because of course now it's 1 year since he passed away. So basically, in 2019, Berlusconi released an interview in which he said it was us, Forza Italia, who legitimized them, and he meant the fascists. And when that happened in 1994, when the post-fascists were, well, new fascists, because in 1994 it was the time in which Fini, who was the leader of the MSI, who was the party founded by Giorgio Almirante, who was a killer of partisans, an outright killer of partisans, said, we are proudly fascist, and we don't have to renege on our history. And basically, in 1994, the fascists, for the first time in their history, joined a government with Silvio Berlusconi. So that was the first episode. Second episode, in 2006, Berlusconi forms this coalition, House of Liberties, which includes neo-fascist groups which were involved in also criminal activities, like Forza Nuova. It was 2006. I mean, those people were proved to be violent, to attack people, not just migrants and so on, but also to be involved in criminal organizations. And Berlusconi candidated him. Now, Berlusconi, who looks like a moderate right wing, he did that in 2006. 2014, Casa Pound, who was the leading organization of the neo-fascist, supports during the electoral campaign Matteo Salvini's Lega, and they hold a common rally. And during this rally, Simone Di Stefano, the leader of Casa Pound, says, "We agree 100% with the program of Matteo Salvini." It was 2014. What happens then? That in 2018, Casa Pound runs alone in the election, in the general election, and it scores a ridiculous 0.9. They renounce basically electoral politics. They say we're done with that. But so many people in my country believe that that was at the end of at least neo-fascist party. That wasn't the case, because in 2018, during an event, La Russa, who's one of the main leaders of Fratelli d'Italia, Giorgia Meloni's party, says, and I will read in one common event organized by both parties, and I will read this sentence because I think it's very important. "It was important for me to be here because I want to help give cultural legitimacy to this movement, to the new fascist movement." And then he goes on proposing Casa Pound to join a common ground, a common movement. And Di Stefano, the leader of Casa Pound, says, "No, I get your point, but the point is that Casa Pound has not stopped doing politics. Our ideas," and I'm quoting, are an added value. They have been taken up by other parties and movements." And he clearly pointed out to his fellow speaker, Ignazio La Russa. So basically, what's happening today? I think we can rightly say that Casa Pound, so the new fascist group. I mean, I know them personally also because I was assaulted by them physically 2 times, not once, 2 times, and not to be, of course, to be a victim, but there's another point of the Italian far right. If I go too long, please interrupt me. There's another point: the disproportionality. 2 minutes, okay. The disproportion, yeah. So basically, what has happened is that the far right has been represented by this common ground in which neo-fascists, of course, are not that visible, but their idea have been taken up by these post-fascists which are now in government. Now, who's Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia? Now, Meloni basically created this party out of nothing, literally out of nothing, in 2012. No one believed that not even that it could win the elections, but could even survive. In fact, in first election, it scored a ridiculous 2%, so below the threshold to enter the parliament. And of course, in 2018, it scored 4%, so it didn't look like a real threat. 2022, 26%. So what happened, and who are they? Basically, they are the direct heir of the Italian social movement. So the post-fascists, they claim the heritage of fascism. And what happened is that basically why Meloni won the election, which I think is very important, maybe in this case also more important that who voted them, because I think that they succeeded in realizing a transversal ground in which working class party are voting for them, working class people are voting for them, but also people from the bourgeoisie, because they represent the bourgeoisie. They are outright representatives of the bourgeoisie. So basically, why Meloni won? There are 2 reasons, and I stop. Basically, the first reason is structural. And I think if we have to say who has the blame, the left has the blame. Because basically the left has left the working class and also fractions of the working class without a real representation. And the left has done what the right now is doing in the exact same way, just with a different rhetoric. The second reason is a contingent reason. Basically what happened in the last 4 years is that, especially since 2018, is that in Italy, many coalition governments were formed in which Fratelli d'Italia, the Meloni's government, was excluded. So they could make up this picture of being outside the jokes, of being the outcast, the excluded. And people believed them. People believed them and people voted for them. What is the problem now? The problem is that it has been 2 years that they are in government. I won't pass on the ideology and so on, because they're doing the exact same things as the other speaker has done, as said about the other countries. But the point is that, so, anti-working class policies, very strong ethno-nationalist identity against women, even though she claims to be, I'm a woman, so I cannot be anti-feminist. Against migrant, and also historical revisionism, because they say, yeah, sometimes they say we are proud to be fascist, sometimes they say we don't want to talk about history, but they just don't refuse their history.
We would like also to hear from all of you what should be done, like how we can resist, how we should, mobilize all together in order to overrate.
The dissolution of the parliament was announced on Sunday night, and the most surprising thing about this announcement was the very short notice, because he announced elections in 3 weeks, so now it's in 2 weeks. So it is, to be honest, very undemocratic. Because it left very little time to organize. And one way to interpret this decision, so of course he says this was to do it before the Olympics for logistical reasons, but then he could do it after the Olympics. But one way to interpret it is that it was a calculation from Macron that the left, which was very divided during the campaign for the European elections, especially on Palestine, would not be able to unite, and that he would make an alliance with the center left and maybe win the election like this. And to be honest, I was when I on Sunday night I was not confident at all that the left would indeed unite, because all the old tensions between the center left, so Social Democrats, it's called in France the Socialist Party, but it's the equivalent of SPD or PASOK, and the radical left from La France Insoumise, so Mélenchon's party, they had all quarrels, and 2 years ago they united for the legislative elections, but then in between it went worse and worse, and during this campaign about Palestine it went quite bad, so basically the center left participated in this campaign, accusing the far left of anti-Semitism because they were very pro-Palestinian, and the far left answered by saying that you are pro-Israel against the center left, which was not totally true. So yes, the atmosphere was very bad, including between persons, but the unity happened. So the next day, they announced that they would make an alliance that is called Front Populaire, in reference to the Front Populaire of 36, so Popular Front. It includes 4 parties: this Socialist Party, Social Democrats, the Greens, the Radical Left, and the smaller Communist Party. And today, they announced how they divided between themselves the districts, because it's an election district by district, so if you don't unite, you have no chance. They announced how they distributed the districts between them, and they announced a common program. So yes, it was unexpected, and it gives us hope. Although, to be honest, the odds are against us, are for the far right, but it gives us some hope. And I see around me, so of course in leftist circles, I see a real dynamic in this campaign. We have 2 weeks left, but people are very active, and Macron totally lost his bet, and it will be either the far right will win, the most likely, or the left. Maybe just 2 words on this program that came out today. It is a program of compromise, but I would say much closer to the program of the radical left than of the Social Democrats. The biggest points of tensions were on foreign affairs, so on Ukraine and Palestine. They found compromise on this. So I can talk about it, but for Ukraine it's basically we can send weapons but not men, and for Palestine it's we call to respect of decisions from international courts, recognition of state of Palestine, ban of weapons sale. We don't send much weapons to Israel, but we do send some from France. So yes. So a left program, and I think the core of the program that went out today, and that will be the most important thing in the campaign, I hope, is the social program, and it is quite ambitious, although it is not revolutionary, and yes, it's one important point is abolition of Macron's pension reform. There are things on wages and public services with taxation of the rich, and there is this idea that we have to win back the working class. A small part of it, in 2 weeks, not much can be done, but a significant part of it to win some districts. And one idea is that with this emphasis on public services in all the country, access to public services, to public transport, to hospitals, to make sure that there is a doctor in every area, So this is a part of the program. So my hope now is that now that the program is out, is that the campaign in the media, etc., will really focus on this program, which I think would be good, because we see that Macron's party, Macron's policy, socio-economic policies are really hated by the people. And the far right used to have some kind of social program before. They were always a bit hesitant, but they had some. They were officially against the pension reform. But now that they are getting closer to power, they just made an alliance with the conservatives. But the deeper trend is that they try to be more and more respectable for business, and they are very close to some French billionaires. One especially, who is called Bolloré, who was very active in organizing this union between the conservatives and the far right. So I think in this debate on social issues, it is possible to confront them and to explain, as far as is possible in 2 weeks, that they are not going to help their voters. And yes, so this is what I had to say. This is just a description. Then, of course, another question, which I don't really have answers, is if they win, which is still quite likely, what forms of resistance we can have against the far right in government.
Thanks so much. I would like to give the floor to Nora. You mentioned before the anti-fascist movement, or like some bottom-up initiatives. So I would like to hear also from Hungary what is happening.
Okay. Yeah, I think I will be much more shorter on this topic, like what can be done. Yeah, I think I would say that it would be false to think that in Eastern Europe. Or I think I'm a little bit hopeless to think that you can change the things from the left, because there is a really strong anti-communist tradition, and obviously to say people, and also a kind of lack of remembrance, like how was state socialism, what were the positive side of state socialism. What were the negative side of state socialism, and according to researches, for example, among workers, newer generations of workers have way more worse opinion or idea on state socialism. They more associate the system before with the repressive state and secret police, etc., etc. And older generations have kind of they had some benefits from that system in Hungary, which was also kind of specific in the Eastern Bloc, etc. So what can be done? I think now when you see the European elections, there is a new party which was established 1.5 months ago, and they took almost 30% or 25-30% of the votes, and now they have also seats in the European Parliament. And I would say that it's a really important concurrence, I guess, for Fidesz now. But if you see the policies, if you see the rhetoric, they are just a Fidesz which was not yet in the establishment, I would say. And also, this is, I think, one of the point that why they are so popular. I think in every country, anti-establishment politic, it's very you can have the votes through that. Yeah, and about the left, as I mentioned, that there is Sikral. It's a new movement. Also, I think they are existing since 4 years, and they have around 400 members, which for the Hungarian case, for a openly leftist organization, it's a big thing. And they managed, they are pretty much focused on institutional politics, and they now have also a member in the parliament. And I think now they also won 2 or 3 positions in the communal election that was also held 2 weeks ago. But I think it's also, I would say, that there is the leftist ideals, maybe they are discussing on democratic socialism, etc. But the politics that they do, it's much more like it's really local. Like what are the local cases? Like how much you can translate local problems and connect it to with an anti-capitalist or capitalism critical narratives. And they are organizing themselves grassroots. I think there are members who were studying in the UK, and they were also part of the Momentum movement from the Labour Party, and they just took from these tools that were used there. And I also know, which is like more in the direction of unions, that there are some union organizing. It's also quite new in Hungary. That I don't know, like leftist intellectuals go to the I don't know, fabrics, and they are try to organize and make workers' representations locally. But obviously, with this labor code, what we have in Hungary, it's almost impossible to reach anything. And at the same time, like it's really also the culture is really repressive. Like if you are organizing something, you will be fired in, I don't know, next day, and you can't take any legal action against that. Yeah, so I would say like unions are generally really weak. There are some. I think it's really also hard to make general statements about it, because in every industry it's different, in every part of the country it's different, and I think there are stronger unions in places where it's more of a culture. In for example, in the German auto car industry. They tolerate more, I guess, and they are ready to, I don't know, to work with them a little bit. Yeah, so I don't have solutions, and if I have solutions, I would not be here.
I mean, solution cannot be like found next day, but like being here, just like discussing and I don't know, developing new ways to combat things, I think is also a part of the process. Very, very important. And thank you for your positioning. Malene, I think now I'm gonna give the mic to you.
Okay, yeah, first, so I think this was more hopeful than I thought. I mean, at least in France, the left is unifying, and there's some new left movement in Hungary. This is, more than I expected. I will be very, very short, because I think we're running much behind the schedule, and also I think maybe this is the least interesting, because I think most of you are somehow involved in the things that I'm talking about now, so I don't have to tell you so much about it, and it's more interesting to hear from the other countries. But I want to say that I think that these election results that we had now, of course, were especially shocking for some people, or for many people, because we actually had these quite big, big protests against the far right and the AfD in January, at the beginning of the year, when there was this research about how the AfD plans to make life bad for migrants living here and forcing them to leave the country. And I would also say that this research probably just like it coincided with the social mood where there were already a lot of people wanting to do something against the AfD, which had been high in the polls for months. So I think there was this feeling of, let's do something. And then there was this research, and then we had these huge protests. And what I found what I found most interesting about it was that it wasn't only in the big cities, but also in a lot of small towns and in rural areas. There were, I think, a lot of towns where there was the first demonstration against the AfD, or maybe even the first demonstration ever. Like I heard from many towns where there were 60 people on the street or something, but this was then the biggest demonstration they have seen in decades. And there were also many new alliances and initiatives formed. And so now there's this disappointment. But to that, I would say that, I mean, the one thing is that it did make a difference, or at least we can see that in the polls, like back then in January, the AfD was like at around, 23% or something. And it did decline a lot at this time. It was also the time where the party of Sarah Wagenknecht was founded, a former left party politician. So this is probably also a reason, because some voters then switched to that party. But I think it's safe to say that also the protests had an influence. And I think sometimes it's important to remember these things because we are also, like, we always focus on the disappointments and sometimes it's also good to see that there are also that successes. But then also, I mean, also at this time there was also criticism of these protests for being very middle class, very white. There weren't so many migrant organizations involved in them, and I don't really like these debates if they're so much about shaming, like saying, okay, you organized this protest, but you did it in the wrong way, you're bad or whatever. I think this doesn't really help. But I think what we can see is that there's no real material base to this protest, and it doesn't really translate into actual political power. Maybe a bit similar to the big climate strikes, which weren't actual strikes, demonstrations that we saw. So a lot of people demonstrating for different climate politics, but then actually nothing happened. So obviously there's a missing link between these huge demonstrations and actual political decision making. And I think that could be because there is no material force behind these kind of demonstrations. It's more like an intervention in the discourse, and it's nice, but no politician is forced by these things to do something. So I think this is very much what we are missing in Germany right now. We have protests. Sometimes I would say there is still a movement against the far right, and there are still a lot of people who want to do something against it, and also after these elections now who want to get engaged. But there's no material political force behind it. And of course, like a part of the reason for that is also the whole historic development, also with the insignificance that the unions have nowadays. So we have no political force that could organize the working class in an anti-fascist way, but also make a material difference if they are protesting.
No, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Gianluca, you would like to continue with Italian context?
Sure. Yeah, I will try to be very brief because I took too much time before. Basically, I could summarize my whole thought by saying that if the right is winning, it is because of the left, as I already said. But why? Just to give you choose facts. In 1990, the Communist Party of Italy dissolves. It was a decision, no one forced them to do that, and it left people behind shocked. Nevertheless, it was not just that. It was also that the Communist Party of Italy decided in the 90s to go towards the third way of Blair. And basically, over the years, it continued in over this path until the point of Matteo Renzi's cabinet, who was the leader of the Democratic Party, because it changed many names, the subsequent parties that followed the Communist Party of Italy, until the Matteo Renzi's cabinet, who basically implemented all the major reforms that now are being changed basically by Fratelli d'Italia, included the reform of the Constitution, which is actually the main reform that Giorgia Meloni wants to do. She calls that reform the mother of all reforms, and that was something done by the main party of the center left. The second thing, after 1990, there was a split. The major part of the former Communist Party went with the center left party, and the other party, the other part followed the communist. Basically, they formed a communist alliance, which lasted until 2008. It felt pretty well until 2008. It scored around 4, 5, even 6 or 7%. In 2008, it dissolved out of nothing. So, of course, one may say, do we have hope? Because the question was about resistance. I think we have hope. Just to stick to the last elections, one important sign of hope comes from the election of Ilaria Salis, who relates to what happened in Hungary, because she was an anti-fascist, she was a grassroots activist, who was imprisoned in Hungary with the allegation of having beaten up a fascist, which was basically untrue because she didn't plead guilty at all. And still, she spent 1 year and a half in prison. She became candidate for this alliance between the Green Party and the Left Party, and she was elected with lots of preferences. And that is a sign of hope for the future, because she was also confronted with a mediatic pressure which was absolutely against her. The press, and especially the television, said she was she almost was a killer, and all this stuff. Yeah, because they showed pictures of these people which she didn't beat up, and she were even Nazis. So let's think about it. And the second sign for hope, I think we were discussing about it before, I think Italy has a strong history of grassroots movements. In the 70s, we had, if you don't know it, it is difficult to explain it in 2 minutes, but basically was the most important, I think, and also according to historians, it was the most important grassroots web of social movements in Europe. And something remains today. There are many people in a small organization, also trade union. There are some grassroots trade unions which are quite successful. This is a difference compared to Hungary. Which are quite successful. Also, there are cultural organizations, which is a certain Marxist tendencies within university that could be very useful. And if I have to answer the question, what is to be done? Of course, I don't have the answer. But my answer would be: we have to start from rethinking how we look at the world in a scientific way. I always say, when people tell me what are you going to do tomorrow, I always joke saying I'm trying to help rebuilding Marxism. It is a joke, of course, but I think it is very important, because if we don't have a different way to look at the world rooted in a scientific understanding, we don't have a project, a different vision of how we want society to be, and so we won't provide an alternative. Thank you.
Now it's your turn, and then with your...
First, I want to thank you for tolerating my English. It's even worse than Tsipras was in 2009, and my ambition is not to become Prime Minister, be sure for this. So, I find that the Greek case and the Italian case are very common cases, and this is my first thought. The second thought is that if I had to explain very shortly, very in brief, which is the problem for Greece concerning the far right, I would respond that Greece does not have a far right problem, but a right and far right problem. I want to explain this. See the results of the last Euro elections. We had as a general picture that a very fragmented far right could take very significant, very considerable electoral gains, despite its fragmentation, without jeopardizing, without putting in danger the hegemony of the new democracy, that is to say, the conservative hegemony. So I think it's an illusion to find hope in this situation without the idea of rebuilding the left, without the idea of rebuilding an alternative which would be credible, without rebuilding a response. So, in order to explain the resistances towards what is happening with the far right, I think that there is a kind of mirror. What is the far right produces the equivalent resistances. I could point in three currents of the Greek far right. The one is the post-fascist current. The post-fascist parties were voted last Sunday from 250,000 voters, which is something like 120,000 voters more than a year before. It's a very significant proportion, I think. The second one is the neo-fascist current, which is active both in Athens with Pro Patria and Defend Athens, several fascist groups which are called Defend something. And the second current is the Sacred Band, which is Northern Greek current. Sacred Band and the Nationalist Greek Youth, NEF, are the main organization of the Northern neo-Nazi scene. And the third current of the far right, it's a more social, let's say, far right, which is very present at schools and among football fans, both in Athens and in Northern Greek. So, at this, let's say, at this landscape, there is, let's say, a mirror. There are the traditional anarchist groups which are very, very vivid, both in Athens and in Northern Greek. There is the Antifa coordination, or anti-fascist coordination, which is the radical left, which is quite strong and very respectful among anti-fascists. And there is also an, let's say, institutionalized part of the anti-fascist movement. Simeio, from where I come, it's an example of that institutionalization. Simeio is an NGO of the moderate left. Not all of us are moderate, some we are less moderate, let's say, but the idea is something more institutionalized because a very significant part of the far right is also institutionalized. I want to, after describing in short, in brief, the whole landscape, I just want to put an idea for discussion. It seems that in every country, all of us shared experiences which are more or less common. The far right of all the currents is building on the anti-woke agenda in its country. But at the EU level, at the level of the European Union, the reason why the far right seems to be very compatible with the ruling parties and the traditional right parties, it is not the anti-woke agenda. It is their liberal agenda for those of the parties that have a liberal agenda. For example, Le Pen has a less liberal agenda. She's more with the state intervention and economy. Meloni is more compatible because she is more friendly with the European Union, Draghi, no deficit policies, and all this. So, thank you, Liana. So Meloni is useful for being pro-neoliberal, if not neoliberal, and is also useful because she is pro-Israel and pro-Zionism policies in the Middle East. If it is true, if my idea is valid, then maybe we have a short answer concerning what to do against them. And the answer is to take the hegemony on the anti-war movement and on the anti-liberal movement in order to build a credible response towards both the traditional right and the far right. This is my idea and this is what I put in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for your contributions. And I think now it's the time to open the discussion to the public. And if you have any questions to the speakers or you would like to share your ideas, your thoughts, it's your time now. Yeah.
Εντάξει, έπρεπε να κλείσει από εδώ. Α, ναι.
Εντάξει, είμαι μακριά.
First of all, thank you very much for everything that you added today. I think that it was very interesting to see the differences because I think that often we see the far right as one thing, but it isn't. It has a lot to do with historical culture and the historical context in each country. I was wondering, in different countries, different central left to left parties blame different issues for the results of the European elections. Some said it's the media, some said it's TikTok. And my question is, there was also the argument that the central left did not do what they promised to do, which was to provide a social state, whether it's PASOK and Syriza, whether it's the Democrats in the US or, yeah. Do you think that's true, or is it just an oversimplification that maybe people want to believe what the far right says? Thank you.
I would say it's true. I mean, of course, it's like as any reason, not the only reason. But I would say that there is disappointment with governments. I mean, you talked a bit about Macron, where we can probably see this the most clearly because he has the most neoliberal politics. But I mean, also in Germany, the government that we have right now is a neoliberal government, and I think there's a crisis of political representation connected to that, and the far right can profit from them. I mean, there's a question why far or like left parties can profit from that, right? You would say that, you would think that because they have social politics and the far right actually doesn't. I mean, also we see like the weakness of the social democrats, right? I mean, the AfD in Germany, they wouldn't have become a second strongest force if the social democrats weren't so weak. Yeah. Somebody else?
The situation in France is different because social democrats are not in power. So after François Hollande, so in 2017, it was a first in history of the Fifth Republic in France that the president would not represent himself because the polls were so low. And the candidate of the Social Democrat Party, Hamon at the time, everyone has forgotten him now, fared extremely bad. And everyone thought, okay, the Social Democrats are dead as a party. Now it's the radical left that is strong. And things have changed a bit since, which makes it very difficult to analyze the situation or to predict the future, because in the last European elections, this Socio-Democratic Party, which was almost dead 7 years ago, did better than the radical left, because the voters of the radical left don't go to the polls for the European elections, but still they are a bit stronger than they used to. And this is why it was so hard to make this alliance, because the analysis within the party, so I am not a party member, so I am a new union member, so within the party of the radical left, they think, okay, this is a contingency. The sense of history is that social democrat parties are dead. They don't have any reason to be. The people have seen them in power. They didn't. It was already a bit softer neoliberal policies, but so this is, and they think, okay, it's a contingency. Precisely this election, okay. And then the Social Democrats themselves, from their party, they say, no, now we are at least as strong as you are. And this makes the negotiations between the two very difficult. Now, there were negotiations around this program for these elections. I think the outcome was pretty good, ambitious program, but it's not at all clear that in the next election it will persist. And I think there is a strong temptation within the Social Democrats to ally again with Macron in this, I think, totally empty, totally unreasonable hope that Macron will find, I mean the Macronists will find in their deep soul their left ambitions of the past, etc. But within the Social Democrats, this is a strong tendency. So for now, they are with us, but we don't know. It's really hard to say.
Thank you, Hans, again also for your presentations. I just wanted to add or ask about the fact that we know that in most cases there has been Russian involvement, except for Meloni, which is a very clear exception, a big supporter of Ukraine. But in all other cases, there has been a lot of Russian involvement in the funding or spies when it comes, or even in online bots. So we know that in Greece there were Russian spies co-organizing the demonstrations about the Macedonian name dispute, for instance. We know that in Germany, in France, in Hungary, there was Russian money going into those parties, or Le Pen did not receive funds, but she only had her bank accounts in Russia. So it's obvious that the rise of the far right in Europe is desired by some specific foreign forces. And in this case, I'm wondering if this becomes even a matter of international security. It's obviously a desire to limit democracy in Europe, to limit understanding among us, diversity in Europe. And in this case, what are we supposed to do when we mix the rise of far right with foreign policy, specifically with Russia and China? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer your question about international security. I think I'm really far of the discussions about geopolitics, etc. And that's why I also don't want to go in this direction. But what I can say from the Hungarian perspective, that it's also a quite big interest of the Hungarian government, that they are not just have the dependency on the Western states in question of credits, in question of policies that are pushed by the IMF, etc., which was really significant before 2010. And the first step also for the Fidesz was to pay back the credits for the IMF and become more and more independent from the Western states. And as you can see, like now there are a lot of cooperation with Chinese and Eastern Asian industry, who are bringing, for example, the battery industry into Eastern Europe, and they get access to the European market through Hungary and other Eastern European countries. And in case of from this perspective, people says that also if you get credits from China, if you get credits not from the West, they are more flexible, and they are more flexible for the local oligarchy or local capitalists. I dislike the word oligarchy, to get the money. And I think, like, I don't know if there is a big international plan about this, but I would just point out the local interest of these capitalists and politicians.
Do we have other questions, maybe? Yeah.
Yes, so thank you for your question, and it's the occasion also to maybe compare a bit between the countries. So Marine Le Pen used to be pro-Russian, and she received Russian money. So this was open, like this was a loan from a Russian bank, and she was pro-Russian until the war and at the beginning of the war. Now there is a rapid shift within the party. There is now this new young figure, who is the candidate for prime minister for the far right, Jordan Bardella, and I think this is one of his only individual decisions, that not just being the puppet of the party. He has said, no, I don't agree with Marine Le Pen on this. We are pro-NATO. And I think this is the geopolitical aspect. So of course they will be less pro-Ukraine than Macron, who has opened the question of sending troops. So, but they want to align with NATO, and I think this is part of a bigger shift where Le Pen's party is shifting very fast to the Melonist model, and I think they are now very inspired by it because. And this is true also on socioeconomic things, and you said before that Marine Le Pen was a representative of this kind of far right that is statist, sovereignist, and this used to be very true in 2017. They did a campaign where they opened the possibility of leaving the Eurozone to regain power over monetary policy, etc., nationalizing some companies, etc. And now they totally left this, and very quickly. And now during the days of the campaign, we are seeing that they are abandoning all their non-neoliberal policies, which were not necessarily left-wing. And they are really aligning on this model: integration within the EU, integration within NATO, and integration within neoliberalism. So I think they were very fascinated with Orban at some point, this idea of regaining your economy with your oligarchy, and also this idea of the alliance with Russia. And now they are shifting to Meloni because they see, and I think they are right in this, that this is the easiest way for them to get to power and to not run into difficulties when they are in power.
One or two comments. It is obvious that you know better the French case. I was thinking that in the scenario that Meloni and Le Pen makes a common Euro team, maybe Le Pen is coming more and more near to Meloni, and that is to say the liberal agenda. I think that the Greek case is not a case of a pro-Putin, pro-Russia far right. I think that more and more all of the three parties that are represented either in the Greek parliament or the Euro parliament are totally aligned with the Greek government concerning the foreign relations. I was hearing, for example, Aphrodite Latinopoulou, which is the newly elected Euro MP, saying that the attack of October was an attack to the West because Israel is a bridge of the West in the Middle East. This is not anti-government, this is not anti-NATO policy. Despite the fact that Velopoulos, the president of the Greek solution, which is the principal political force of the Greek far right now, despite the fact that he wanted to represent the northern Greeks, in the northern Greek there is an activity of the Russian capital, a very dense activity of the Russian capital in Salonika and cities around Salonika. Velopoulos never challenged the orientation of the Greek government to NATO and to the EU, never. And despite the fact that he was presenting himself as being against the memoranda, before the Euro election said that without the memoranda, the Greeks would have died. So the orientation is never challenged by the Greek far right. I wanted just to, a very, very short comment, at the question, did the capitulation of the central left change the whole landscape? I said initially that I find that our two cases are very common cases. For me, it is unthinkable for a party, whichever this party is, if it cannot organize people, if it cannot mobilize people to represent people. And after 2015, Syriza, I was a part of this party, was a member of this party. Syriza lost its capacity to organize, to mobilize, and to represent. But against fascists, this is another page. I was among the persons that I was insisting that Syriza, even after the capitulation, it was unthinkable to be rejected from the anti-racist and anti-fascist movement. I think that the movements and the anti-fascist movement went very. They had a withdrawal from the streets after 2015. Nobody can compare what was happening in the Greek streets before 2015 and after. Okay, but what we have to solve with the capitulation or the social liberalization of a part of the Greek left is another story, and what we have to solve with the fascists is another story. In the second story, I think that even today, that Syriza of today, of Kasselakis, it does not choose to be in the left. Even today, I count him among the anti-fascist thing.
I don't know if you have any other questions. No? Okay, if we don't, then I will finish with a question. Huh? Is it okay? And then we have two people who would like to do a statement. So my question is, because I was, the discussion before reminded me the Economist cover with von der Leyen, Meloni, and Le Pen, that they are the women who are gonna run and who are gonna win and run the EU. And obviously, like the extra the far right and also like the neo-Nazi organization before have a very open agenda against feminism, against LGBT rights, and yeah. And in Greece, when the Golden Dawn was enforced, like was a kind big, I guess, representation of women in the party. So I was thinking, like, I would like to ask, Nora and Malene more about what is happening with the female candidates in like far right parties, for example, in AfD. Because I think it's very important, like, to see also the gender aspect in this. Because as you said, like, I'm a feminist, and as Meloni said, I'm a feminist. I cannot be anti-feminist. I'm a woman, but I cannot be anti-feminist. So I think it's a very interesting question to discuss a bit about, and then we can just conclude.
I think it's a really actual question because a lot happened in the last months, and I think like there were a few strong candidates or representatives of Fidesz, like women who had a really strong position in the party, and I think they are also a little bit like a new generation inside of the Fidesz. They were around, I think, 40, and had like really amazing career in different Western European universities. They were working in the EU Parliament, and I think partly, or one of them had also, that's why, a really critical course against the European Union, because she said, okay, I saw the politics in the European Parliament, and I'm against it. And I think it was also kind of opportunist narrative that, okay, how it's going in the European Parliament, it's also only about the power through the liberal institutions, and that's why we don't need the liberal institutions when it's all about power. And this was a kind of narrative why the Hungarian government was demolishing also the liberal institutes. And then like one of these women, she became the Minister of Justice in Hungary until recently, and the other one, she became the President of Hungary. And what I also did not check for a long time from Hungary, or if you only see these people in the Hungarian news, that the president of Hungary, Katalin Novák, she made a really amazing career in Christian organizations, international organizations, who are among the topics of family and children's rights, and like it's really the traditional Christian way of looking on marriage and women, etc. And and then there were, I don't know, like it's a very interesting story, because last year there was a visit from the Pope Francis in Budapest. And from this occasion, the president of Hungary, Katalin Novák, she she let the people out of the prison. Like, you can write a letter to the president and how you say it in English? To release them, yeah. That there were people released from the prison, and it was like what I found from the beginning, really, like there were a right-wing terrorist who was released on the occasion of the visit of the Pope. And but it was really not discussed in the news. And then it was, I think, like 3 or 4 months ago, it came out that they also released the person who had a really good contact with Fidesz government, and he was helping a pedophile guy falsifying testaments of kids who were raped from the other guy. In the middle of the discussion against the woke people who want to damaging the kids and etc. etc. So it was a really huge scandal for the Fidesz, and then both of the women, because the Minister of Justice had to also sign the releasement of these people, and they I think in 1 week they were also sent away. Like the party changed the president, the party changed the Minister of Justice, and I found it really interesting because both were, I think, candidates for the new Orban, like after Orban stopped doing the politics. Yeah, so this is like on the personal level, but obviously, like I think the question of women and feminism or anti-feminism in a country, like there is obviously the liberal institutions and how much representations women get. But as I said, as the social institutions, like the social transfers, so the social state was completely demolished in Hungary. Obviously, it made the situation of women really, really hard because you get like almost no help from the state, and at the same time, there is the big topic is the demographic change. Also in Hungary, that there are like lack of labor shortage. And from this perspective, like the government gives credits to people who are really you get the money and you can pay it back in, I don't know, like 10, 20, 30 years if you get kids. And I see it also in my personal among my friends. Obviously, everyone take these credits. And I think it's really disadvantageous for the women because after you took the credit, you have to produce the kids on one side, and even if the marriage is bad, you have to stay in the marriages. Yeah, and if you arrive for example, to the airport in Budapest, there are huge propaganda billboards about that Hungary is the country of the families because it's so great to be there.
Yeah, brief. I mean, probably Alice Weidel was very angry that she wasn't on this cover, I could imagine. But also, I mean, she is no Meloni. I think the AfD doesn't have a female candidate who represents this kind of, like, being able to build coalitions also to other parties or to a non-far right but conservative fraction of society or something. And I think on the bigger picture, I think these anti-feminist topics are very important for the far right because with them you can build alliances to other, like into society, like especially with this anti-wokeness and anti-LGBT and this kind of stuff. But then also, I think it can also become very dangerous for them because today we don't have anybody from Poland here, but I mean for the peace, for example, when they attempted to restrict abortion rights, there were this huge protests against that, and also I think in the US we can see this. So I think if they go as far as that, then they also have, of course, at least half of the country more or less against them. So yeah, I think that there's also internal conflicts within right-wing parties how to play these topics.